Okay, warm up. We need to factor the expression 4x to the second minus 64. So I underline these, and those are two terms. Okay? So when you see two terms from this moment on, you need to make a box to identify your greatest common factor, GCF. And then you need a second box to see if you have a DOPS, which is difference of perfect squares. Okay. So here's the things you check for on a GCF. You check for first the negative. Do you need a negative? Well, it depends on your first number. It's positive, so I don't need the negative. Then you need to check for x. If x is on both, you need x in your GCF, but you don't have it on both, so you don't need it. Now, I find the greatest common factor of the numbers themselves, the 4 and the 64. So 4 is the smaller of the two. So factors of 4, you got 1 and 4, and then divide by 2, you get 2. I got twin factors, so that's the end of the factor list. So now I look at 4, and I want to see if I can divide both 4 and 64 by 4. Well, I know 4 divides by 4, but does 64? Yeah, it does. So I need to take this 4 over here, but just 4. You're not going to connect an x to the 4, okay? You're just going to divide by 4. And 4 divided by 4 is 1, and then we have x to the second power still, and then negative 64 divided by 4 is negative 16, so minus 16, okay? Now I see if I have a difference of perfect squares, okay? And by the way, when I'm checking for that, I'm looking here, these two. So first I have a minus sign. I need the minus sign. If I have a plus, I can't do it. Okay, and the minus sign's there for us. So now I see if 16 is a perfect square, okay? Remember, the perfect squares are these numbers here that go diagonally, okay? And 16 is on this list here. It's 4 times 4. Okay, so 4 times 4 is 16. Now 1's a perfect square because that's 1 times 1. And then x to the second power, as long as it's the second power, will be x times x. So it's a difference of perfect squares. So I have 1x, and then 4 and 4. Now this 4 here, I drop this down because that's a factor. So it's 4 times 1x plus 4 times 1x minus 4. Okay, now in this problem here, we have, again, two terms. So I see if I have a greatest common factor that's worth. And then I see if I have a difference of perfect squares. Again, your difference of perfect squares is 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, 100, 121, 144, 169, 196, and 225. Okay. Okay, so GCF, I don't need a negative, I don't need an x because 9 doesn't have an x, and 1 and 9. 1's a smaller number, so the only factor of 1's 1. So the GCF's 1. Anytime it's 1, I don't worry about that. Okay? And then I see if I have a difference of perfect squares. Okay, so 9. 9's on the list. That's 3 by 3. We do have the minus sign. 1's on the list. That'd be 1 times 1. And then anytime the x is to the second power, that's x times x. So everything works out. I can write conjugates, meaning they're the same thing, just one's a plus, one's a minus. And I didn't do a GCF, so there's your factoring. 1x plus 3 times 1x minus 3. Okay, my next one, I've got two terms. So GCF. And then difference of perfect squares. That's just the abbreviation for it. So first off, I'm going to need a negative this one because I have a negative in front. I don't need x, but look at 48 and 12, so break down the 12. You got 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. So let's see if we can divide. I know 12 divides by 12. Let's see if 48 divides by 12. Yep, it does. So 12. Negative 12, though. So I pull out, factor out a negative 12. Negative 48 divided by negative 12 is 4, and then x to the second. Positive 12 divided by negative 12 is negative 1, so minus 1. Okay. Now, for the GCF, I'm looking at this expression here. So I have the minus. 1 would be 1 times 1. 4 would be 2 by 2. Then x to the second power means I just connect an x on each 2 factor. So 2x, 2x, 1, 1, and drop your negative 12 down here. Okay, so negative 12 times 2x plus 1 times 2x minus 1. Okay, now here again we have 2 terms. So GCF. And then again, I'd see if I have a difference of perfect squares. That's always how we're going to set up 2 terms to be factored. So the GCF, we're going to need a negative. We're not going to need an x. 2 and 162, you got 1 and 2. So see if 162 divides by 2. Okay, yep, it does. So negative 2 is the GCF. Okay, now negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1, but the x to the second still hangs there. And then positive 162 divided by negative 2 is negative 81, so minus 81. Okay, so again, I have a minus, and 81, there's 81. That's 9 by 9. Okay, so 9 times 9. 1 times 1, and then x to the second power would be x times x. So we got 1x, 9, 9, and pull down your negative 2. Okay, and that's the factorization. Okay, now that gets you warmed up for your assignment. Now on your assignment, it's 4 problems in the back. Cross out, get rid of that 3. That should say minus 5 on number 3. You get really frustrated if you leave that as 35. Okay, so on this term, there's some of them have 2 terms like this one does, and some of them have 3 like this term one does. Okay, that's all you're going to see is 2 and 3. So 2 terms, again, I set up my greatest common factor box. And then with 2 terms, my second box is checking to see if I have a difference of perfect squares. Okay, so the GCF, we're going to need the negative. You're also going to need x because you have x on both of your terms. Then 7 and 49, so 7, the only factors of 7 are 1 and 7 because 7 divided by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are all decimals, and then I'm back to 7. So I know 7 divides by 7. 49 divided by 7 is 7. So this is the one we take. So I factor out negative 7x. So go divide. So this is 1. And then x squared divided by x, we can cross that out. And that would just go down to a regular x. And that would be negative 7. So minus 7. And those cancel. Now the difference of perfect squares, I'm looking at this expression here. So we have our minus, but I don't have 7 in this bubble here. Okay, 7's not there, so that makes you need to cross that out. Means you can't do it. So this is the end of the factoring. Okay, you just stop there with the GCFs, all you can do. Okay, now here's 3 terms. So 3 terms is GCF. But in the second box, now we make it longer, and I split it in half because I need my AC table. So GCF, we don't need a negative. We don't need x because 27 doesn't have it. And then 1, 12, and 27, 1's the greatest common factor. So if it's 1, it's not worth it. Then I label A, B, C, and I multiply my A times my C. So positive 1 times positive 27 is positive 27. So it's positive, so it's an add. If it's negative, it's minus, but this one's positive, so we add, and we're trying to get to 12, which is negative. So I try to add the factors to 12, then I worry about the negative. 1 and 27, that's not 12. Divide by 2, I get decimal, so now I go to 3, and I get 9. 9 plus 3 is 12, so those are the factors. 12's negative, so we know the higher factor is negative because of that. And anytime I have a positive up there, the signs are, with the product, the signs are the same, so they'd both be negatives. Now, what's your A? Your A is 1x to the second. So if it's a 1, as long as it's a 1, we can ignore it and just make 2 parentheses. And x times x is x to the second. Now, the positive 27 is minus 3 minus 9. We did not do the GCS, so I don't need to put anything down here. So x minus 3 times x minus 9. Okay, my next problem, there are 3 terms. Again, there's 3. So we're going to make a GCF box, and then we're going to construct our AC table. And then we'll need to figure out what A is. Okay, so GCF, we don't need the negative. We don't need X. 5, 7, and 6, that'd be 5. So factors of 5, you got 1 and 5. And then that's prime. That's the only 2 factors that exist because it's not divisible by 2, 3, 4, and then I'm back to 5. So I can divide 5 by 5, but 7 divided by 5 is a decimal. So it leaves me with 1, and anytime it's 1, we don't do it. So A, B, C. I take positive 5 times negative 6. And that's negative 30. So this time I get a negative product with the A times C. So that's going to be a minus, and we're trying to get it to equal 7, which is negative. 1 and 30. 30 minus 1 is not 7. 30 divided by 2 is 15. 15 minus 2 is not 7. 30 divided by 3 is 10. 10 minus 3 is 7. So because that 7's negative, you got negative 10. And you got a negative up there, so the signs aren't the same. They're the opposite. So it's minus 10 plus 3. Okay, now my A is 5x to the second. So on this one, since it's a 5 and not a 1, I can't get rid of it. So I need to make two lines of parentheses. And I start with a 5 in front of my x's to start with. And then plus 3 minus 10. Now 5 and 3, the only thing those are both divisible by is 1. Okay, they're not in the same row and anywhere else. So that means they're just going to stay the same. Now 5 and 10, you see 5 and 10 are both in the row of 5, so we want to divide by 5. That's 1x minus 2. Okay? Didn't have a GCF. Now you can always check if you did this right. This times this, 5x times 1x should be your A. And then this times this, that should be your C, which it is. So that's the answer. Okay, my next one, that's 2 terms. So it's going to be greatest common factor. And then with 2 terms, we see if we have a difference of perfect squares. Okay, we do need a negative. We don't need x because 32 doesn't have it. 2 and 32. That's it. Now see if you can divide 32 by 2. You know you can divide 2 by 2. So negative 2, but we're not going to bring an x out. It's just negative 2. So that's positive 1. The x stays to the second, and that's negative 16, so minus 16. Now perfect squares. So we have a minus. You always need a minus there. Now 16, that's 4 by 4. 1, that's 1 by 1, and then the x to the second means it's x by x. So that's 1x, 1x, and 4. Now carry that negative 2 down. So negative 2 times 1x plus 4 times 1x minus 4. If it's a 1, you can also just put it as x. Okay, next one, 12x to the second minus 5x minus 2. So that's 3 terms. So it'd be GCF. And then my T table with the AC. Okay, GCF, negative in front, nope. You're not going to need an x because we don't have x on every number. Okay, 12, 5, and 2, 2, 1, and 2. Now, 12 divided by 2 is 6, but 5 divided by 2 is a decimal, so I can't use 2. So the greatest common factor is 1, okay? And then I go A, B, C. So I multiply the A by the C. 12 by negative 2, that's negative 24, okay? So I got a negative, so this will be a minus, and I'm trying to get the minus to equal 5. So 1 and 24, 24 minus 1 is not 5. 24 divided by 2 is 12. That isn't 5. 24 divided by 3 is 8. 8 minus 3 is 5. Okay, 5 negative means you got negative 8. And having a negative up there means the signs are the opposite. Now remember, if up here I have a positive, they're the same. But if they're negative, they're opposite. So this would be plus. Now my A is 12x to the second power. So it's not 1, so I have to break the 12 down, and I do that using the 4 parentheses. So I start with a 12 in front of each x, and then plus 3 minus 8. Now I divide these down. So 12 and 3 are both in the row of 3, so divide by 3, and that's 4x plus 1. 12 and 8. Now they are both in the row of 2, but there's a number higher than that, and you need to pick the highest possible one, which would be 4, okay? You can't find a 12 and an 8 anywhere down here, okay? So we're going to go with 4, and that's 3x minus 2. Okay, there's no GCF. Remember, 4x times 3x is 12x second, and then 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. Okay, my next problem, this only has 2, so when there's 2, I do a greatest common factor. And then after that's done, I see if I have a difference of perfect squares. Okay, so we don't need a negative. We do need x, though, because x is connected to both of the 2 terms. So x, and then 4 and 16, so 4, 1, 4, double 2s. Anytime we get double of a factor, that's all at the end of it. Okay, so 4 obviously divides by 4, and so does 16, so 4x. So 4x comes out. Then I go divide by 4x. So that gives me 1. Remember, we cancel that, and that goes to 1x. Plus 4, and we get rid of those. Okay, you cross this out because anytime you have a plus, then between the 2 terms, the plus you can't factor 2 terms of the plus with the difference of perfect squares. So this is it, and that's your answer, 4x times 1x plus 4. Okay, next one. That's 2 terms. So I would look for greatest common factor, and then see if I have a difference of perfect squares. Okay, you don't need the negative, you don't need x, and then 1. Well, that would just be 1, so it's not worth it. Now we have a minus. Okay, remember we're looking at this expression, and 36 is a perfect square. You got 6 by 6. Okay, 1, that'd be 1 by 1. And then the x to the second power would be xx, so that'd be 1x, 6, 6. You didn't do a GCF, so that's your answer, 1x plus 6 times 1x minus 6. Okay, and then the last one, this one's got 3 terms, okay? So GCF, and then my AC table, because you're going to do ABC. But first, GCF. You don't need the negative, you don't need x, 1, 4, and 32 is 1. The only factor of 1 is 1, so okay. ABC. So I take positive 1 times negative 32. That's a negative. So this would be a minus, and I'm trying to get the minus to be 4, which is positive. It's not 1 and 32. 32 divided by 2 is 16. That's 14. Divided by 3 is a decimal. Divided by 4 is 8. 8 minus 4 is 4. So my 4 is positive, so we got positive 8. And anytime I have a negative, the signs have to be the opposite. So if I have plus 8, minus 4. Now my A is 1x to the second. So if it's a 1, you can't really break down a 1. So that's actually good because all I need is 2 parentheses. And I can just go xx minus 4 plus 8. Didn't have a GCF. Again, x times x is x to the second. Having the 1 there is not important. The negative 4 times 8 is negative 32.